Hypothesis, meaning, formation, and types. What is a hypothesis? A hypothesis is a tentative assumption or a provisional statement made to explain a research problem or answer a research question. It is an educated guess based on observation, existing knowledge, and logical reasoning. A hypothesis is not a final conclusion, rather, it is a statement that can be tested, verified, or rejected through research and evidence. In legal and social science research, a hypothesis helps the researcher to focus the study on specific issues. It gives direction to the research by clearly stating what the researcher expects to find. By testing a hypothesis, researchers can examine the relationship between legal rules, social behavior, and outcomes. Thus, a hypothesis plays a crucial role in conducting systematic and scientific research. Identification of a research problem. The researcher first selects a legal or social problem. Identification of a research problem is the first and most important step in forming a hypothesis. It involves selecting a specific legal or social issue that needs study or solution. The problem should be clear, relevant, and researchable. In legal research, this may include issues related to laws, judicial decisions, legal procedures, or social impact of law. A clearly identified research problem helps the researcher to focus the study and provides a proper direction for further research. Review of literature. Existing books, articles, laws, and case laws are studied. Review of literature means a careful study of existing books, journals, research articles, statutes, case laws, and reports related to the research topic. It helps the researcher understand what has already been written on the subject and identify gaps or issues that need further study. In legal research, reviewing literature helps in gaining background knowledge, avoiding repetition, and forming a strong and relevant hypothesis. Identification of a research problem. The researcher first selects a legal or social problem. Identification of a research problem is the first and most important step in forming a hypothesis. It involves selecting a specific legal or social issue that needs study or solution. The problem should be clear, relevant, and researchable. In legal research, this may include issues related to laws, judicial decisions, legal procedures, or social impact of law. A clearly identified research problem helps the researcher to focus the study and provides a proper direction for further research. Review of literature. Existing books, articles, laws, and case laws are studied. Review of literature means a careful study of existing books, journals, research articles, statutes, case laws, and reports related to the research topic. It helps the researcher understand what has already been written on the subject and identify gaps or issues that need further study. In legal research, reviewing literature helps in gaining background knowledge, avoiding repetition, and forming a strong and relevant hypothesis. Observation and experience. Practical experience or social observation helps in forming assumptions. Observation and experience play an important role in forming a hypothesis. By observing social conditions, legal practices, court procedures, or real-life problems, the researcher gains practical insight into the issue. Personal or professional experience also helps in understanding how law operates in society. These observations and experiences assist the researcher in making logical assumptions and framing a realistic and meaningful hypothesis. Logical reasoning. The researcher uses logic to predict a possible answer to the problem. Logical reasoning is an essential step in forming a hypothesis. After studying the research problem, literature, and observations, the researcher uses logic and critical thinking to draw a possible explanation or assumption. Logical reasoning helps in connecting facts, identifying relationships between variables, and framing a hypothesis that is rational and testable. It ensures that the hypothesis is based on reason rather than guesswork. Clear statement. The hypothesis is framed in clear and simple language so that it can be tested. A hypothesis must be framed as a clear and precise statement. It should be written in simple language so that its meaning is easily understood. A clear statement helps in testing and verifying the hypothesis through research. It avoids ambiguity and ensures that the research remains focused and systematic. Types of hypothesis. Hypotheses can be classified into different types based on the nature of the relationship between variables and the purpose of research. Each type of hypothesis helps the researcher to study a problem from a specific angle and test assumptions in a systematic manner. Understanding the types of hypothesis is important for conducting clear, logical, and effective research. Null hypothesis, H. It states that there is no relationship or no difference between variables. The null hypothesis states that there is no relationship, no effect, or no difference between the variables under study. It assumes that any observed change is due to chance. In research, the null hypothesis is tested and may be accepted or rejected based on evidence. Example: there is no impact of legal awareness programs on access to justice. Null hypothesis, H. A null hypothesis, denoted by H, is a statement which assumes that there is no relationship, no effect, or no difference between the variables under study. It is the basic assumption made by a researcher at the beginning of research. The purpose of the null hypothesis is to test whether the results obtained are due to chance or are statistically significant. In research, especially legal and social science research, the null hypothesis is framed to be tested and verified. The researcher collects data and applies research methods to either accept or reject the null hypothesis. If sufficient evidence is found against it, the null hypothesis is rejected and the alternative hypothesis is accepted. The null hypothesis helps in maintaining objectivity and neutrality in research. It prevents the researcher from being biased and ensures that conclusions are based on evidence rather than assumptions. Courts, policymakers, and researchers rely on such objective findings for decision-making and law reform. Example: there is no impact of legal awareness programs on access to justice. Alternative hypothesis, H. An alternative hypothesis, denoted by H, is a statement which suggests that there is a relationship, effect, or difference between the variables under study. It is the opposite of the null hypothesis and represents what the researcher expects to prove through research. The alternative hypothesis comes into effect when the null hypothesis is rejected. In legal and social science research, the alternative hypothesis is framed to show that a particular factor has an influence or impact on another. It helps the researcher to focus on testing the existence of a relationship or change. Data and evidence are collected to support or disprove this hypothesis. The alternative hypothesis plays an important role in developing new ideas, improving laws, and suggesting reforms. It allows researchers to explore how legal rules, policies, or practices affect society in reality. Once the null hypothesis is rejected based on evidence, the alternative hypothesis is accepted. Example: legal awareness programs improve access to justice. Simple hypothesis. A simple hypothesis is a type of hypothesis that states the relationship between one independent variable and one dependent variable. It focuses on a single cause and effect relationship and is easy to understand and test. This type of hypothesis is commonly used in basic and legal research where the researcher wants to examine the effect of one factor on another. In a simple hypothesis, the independent variable is the cause or influencing factor, while the dependent variable is the effect or outcome. The hypothesis predicts how a change in the independent variable will affect the dependent variable. Because only two variables are involved, the research remains clear and focused. In legal research, a simple hypothesis helps in studying specific legal issues in a systematic way. It allows the researcher to collect relevant data and draw conclusions based on evidence. This type of hypothesis is useful for beginners and for studies with limited scope. Example: increase in legal aid improves access to justice. Complex hypothesis. It shows a relationship between two or more variables. A complex hypothesis is a type of hypothesis that states the relationship between two or more independent variables and two or more dependent variables. Unlike a simple hypothesis, It deals with multiple factors and their combined effect. This type of hypothesis is used when a research problem is broad and involves more than one cause or outcome. In a complex hypothesis, the researcher examines how several factors together influence legal or social results. It is commonly used in legal and socio-legal research where law interacts with many social, economic, and institutional factors. Because of multiple variables, this hypothesis requires detailed data collection and careful analysis. Complex hypotheses help in understanding real-life legal problems more deeply, as most legal issues are influenced by many factors at the same time. However, they are more difficult to test compared to simple hypotheses. Example: legal awareness, availability of legal aid, and use of technology together improve access to justice and reduce delay in courts. Directional hypothesis. It predicts the direction of the relationship between variables. A directional hypothesis is a type of hypothesis that predicts the direction of the relationship between variables. It clearly states whether the effect will be positive or negative. Unlike a non-directional hypothesis, it does not just say that a relationship exists, but also explains how one variable will affect the other. In legal and social science research, a directional hypothesis is used when the researcher has sufficient knowledge, theory, or past research to predict the outcome in advance. It helps in focused research and clearer testing because the expected direction is already defined. Directional hypotheses are useful in evaluating legal reforms, policies, and programs where the expected impact is known. They make research more specific and meaningful. Example: use of legal design increases understanding of legal documents among common people. Non-directional hypothesis. It states that a relationship exists but does not specify the direction. A non-directional hypothesis is a type of hypothesis that states that a relationship or difference exists between variables, but it does not specify the direction of that relationship. It does not predict whether the effect will be positive or negative. The main purpose is to test whether a connection exists at all. In legal and social science research, a non-directional hypothesis is used when the researcher does not have enough prior knowledge or evidence to predict the outcome. It allows open and unbiased investigation of the research problem. This type of hypothesis is commonly used in exploratory studies. Non-directional hypotheses give equal importance to all possible outcomes and help in maintaining objectivity in research. Example: there is a relationship between legal awareness and access to justice. Conclusion: a non-directional hypothesis is important because it allows flexible and unbiased research. It helps researchers explore relationships without making prior assumptions about the results. Conclusion: a hypothesis is an important part of research because it gives a clear direction to the study. It is an educated guess that helps the researcher understand what needs to be tested and proved. A hypothesis makes research systematic and meaningful. The formation of a hypothesis involves identifying a problem, studying existing material, observing facts, using logical thinking, and writing a clear statement. This ensures that the hypothesis is based on knowledge and reasoning, not on guesswork. Different types of hypothesis such as simple, complex, null, alternative, directional, and non-directional help the researcher study problems in different ways. Each type is useful depending on the nature of the research. In conclusion, a properly framed hypothesis improves the quality and reliability of research. In legal studies, it helps in understanding laws better and contributes to the development and improvement of the legal system.